John Reynolds never imagined that his life would end up like this. He was once a hero. He once wore his uniform with pride, hearing the national anthem play as he marched alongside his brothers in arms. But now he's just another forgotten face in the crowd, someone people avoid making eye contact with as they rush past on the cold city streets. Sitting on a park bench, he observes the hustle and bustle around him. Parents play with their kids, couples laugh while holding hands, busy executives talk on their phones. Everyone seems to have a destination, a purpose. Everyone except for him. Beside John, an old, crumpled sign lies on the ground. War veteran. Any help is welcome. The letters have faded, just like the hope in his heart. He clenches his hands inside the pockets of his worn coat. The cold doesn't bother him as much as the emptiness he carries within. Closing his eyes, he tries to push away the memories, but they always come rushing back. The sound of helicopters slicing through the sky, the shouts of his comrades, the dust rising after an explosion, the smell of smoke, the bitter taste of loss. John returned from the war, but the war never left him. Post-traumatic stress haunted him like a shadow, making it impossible to hold a job, to build a normal life. Each sleepless night was haunted by nightmares. Every loud noise made him flinch. Friends drifted away. Family tried to help, but how could they explain the invisible weight he carried? The street became his only home. Days were long, nights even longer. Some people stopped to drop coins into the cup beside him. Others merely glanced, then moved on, as if he were part of the scenery. And the truth. He no longer knew if he wanted to be noticed, or if he'd prefer to disappear entirely. But that night, something different happens. A black car slows down next to the bench. John doesn't pay much attention. Maybe it's just another person waiting for the light to change, someone who would never notice a man like him. But the car doesn't move along. The door opens, and a young man steps out. He walks toward John. Without hesitation, without fear, without averting his gaze. John looks up, surprised. Few people approach him like this. The young man stops in front of him and smiles. And then, with a friendly and sincere tone, he asks a simple question, but one John hasn't heard in a long time. "Hey, how are you doing, my friend?" For a moment, John thinks he misheard. No one asks him that kind of question. In fact, no one has spoken to him in days, but here stands this young man, waiting for an answer. John looks at his face, trying to understand. The guy has an easy smile, a genuine look. And something about him seems different from all the people who have passed by. "How am I doing?" John repeats, his voice hoarse from the cold and time. He lets out a short laugh without humor. "Well, I've been worse." The young man sits down beside him on the bench, taking his time, as if this were the most important place in the world right now. John watches with suspicion. People usually don't do this. They either rush past pretending he doesn't exist or toss a few coins without even looking into his eyes, but this guy, he's just there, simply listening. "My name is Jimmy," he says, extending his hand. John hesitates but shakes the young man's hand. It's been a while since someone greeted him like this. There's something familiar about that name. Something he's heard before, but his weary mind can't quite remember what. "So, John, what happened?" The question catches him off guard. No one has ever asked him that. No one has ever wanted to know his story. The norm would be to hear a rushed "good luck" or a "God bless you" said from a distance. But Jimmy doesn't look away. He wants to know. He truly wants to know. John lets out a long sigh, looks at the weathered sign beside him, and for the first time in a long time, he starts to tell his story. John talks, and for the first time in years, someone truly listens. He shares about his days in the army, the friends he lost, the return home that was never a real fresh start. He talks about the closed doors, the cold nights, and the overwhelming feeling of being invisible. Jimmy listens in silence without interrupting, without averting his gaze. When John finishes, there's a moment of pause, as if the very air around them has grown heavier. Then Jimmy takes a deep breath and smiles. A sincere smile, but heavy with something more, as if he already knows exactly what to do. "John, do you believe in miracles?" The question catches John off guard. He lets out a low, tired laugh. Miracles? At this point in life, he has learned not to expect anything from anyone. But before he can respond, Jimmy gets up and gives him a pat on the shoulder. "Meet me here tomorrow. Trust me." John doesn't understand. What more could this guy want from him? But deep down, there's a small voice preventing him from simply ignoring it. A voice he hasn't heard in a long time. The voice of hope. That night, he sleeps in his usual corner with his stomach growling and his body aching from the cold. But something feels different. For the first time in a long while, he closes his eyes and thinks, "What if?" The next day, when John returns to the same bench, Jimmy is already there, smiling and holding an envelope. And everything that happens from that moment changes his life forever. John stares at the envelope in Jimmy's hands. He feels the weight of the paper, but more than that, he feels the weight of what it represents. He has never held this much money at once. $10,000, enough money to change everything. But why? Why is Jimmy, a complete stranger, doing this? "This isn't just a gift, John," Jimmy says, serious. "It's an opportunity. What you do with this money could define the course of your life moving forward." John presses his lips together. He has seen many people in his situation receive help, only to be back on the streets days later. Because money alone doesn't heal a broken heart. But what about him? Can he really change? With trembling hands, John places the envelope inside his coat and says goodbye to Jimmy. He walks through the streets, feeling the weight of the choice on his shoulders. He could get a hotel for a few weeks, buy new clothes, have a decent meal. But would that really solve the problem? Then, as he turns the corner, he spots an old veterans shelter. He stops for a moment, staring at the door. He's been there before. He knows those faces. Faces like his. Men and women who gave everything for their country and returned only to be forgotten. Without a second thought, John walks in. He approaches the reception desk and places half the money on the counter. The attendant stares at him, surprised. "They need this more than I do," he says, a sincere smile spreading across his face. For the first time in years, he feels like he's doing something right. Outside, hidden among the people on the street, Jimmy watches everything unfold. He smiles, arms crossed. John has made his choice, and now he is ready for the next step. The next day, John returns to the park bench, unsure if Jimmy would actually show up. Part of him still can't believe what happened. Maybe it was a dream, one of those illusions the mind creates when it's too tired. But then, there he is. Jimmy arrives with the same calm smile, but this time, there's something different in his eyes. "So, John, what did you do with the money?" John takes a deep breath. For a moment, he considers lying, saying he spent it all on himself. But why would he do that? So instead, he tells the truth. He explains that he donated half to the veterans shelter, used the rest to eat properly and buy better clothes. But deep down, he knows that no amount of money would solve his real problem. He still feels lost. Jimmy listens in silence and then smiles, as if he was waiting for that exact response. He gives John a pat on the shoulder and says, "I knew you were different, but now I want to show you something that could truly change your life." They get into a car and drive away from the city center. John looks out the window, trying to imagine where they're going. Then, as they approach, he sees a huge building with a bright sign, "New Life Project." Jimmy parks the car and turns to John. "This place was created for people like you, John. Here, you won't just receive temporary help. You will find purpose, support, and if you want, a job that could transform everything." John feels his heart race. For the first time in a long time, he's afraid, but not a failure. He's afraid to believe that there's still a chance. John steps through the doors of the New Life Project with hesitant steps. The building is spacious, bright, filled with people moving with energy. Some are studying in classrooms, others are training new skills. And there are those who, like him, seem to have carried the weight of the world on their shoulders for far too long. A woman with a gentle smile approaches and greets him by name. John is taken aback. He has never been treated like this anywhere. Jimmy, standing beside him, simply observes, allowing him to absorb everything. "Here, no one will treat you like a lost cause, John. Jimmy finally says, "You have a story, you have worth, and more than that, you have a future waiting for you." John feels a lump in his throat. For years he has heard the same empty words. It will be okay. You'll get through this. This is just a phase. But this time it feels different. These aren't empty promises. He sees other people like him, rebuilding their lives, finding a path. And for the first time, he wonders, can I too? In the following days, he allows himself to try. He goes through therapy sessions, participates in training programs, and talks with other veterans. Gradually, he begins to feel that he is not alone. Each story he hears reflects his own experiences. Every person there understands the weight of pain, but also the strength of overcoming it. Then one day, Jimmy returns to the center and finds John helping a newcomer. The man looks lost, wearing the same expression that John had when he first arrived. But now, John is on the other side. He listens, he advises, he understands. Jimmy crosses his arms and smiles. He knew that John didn't just need money. He required something much bigger, a purpose to move forward. Months pass. John is no longer the man sitting on a bench, waiting for the world to cast him a pitying glance. He has established a routine, a purpose, something that gives meaning to his days. At the New Life Project, he becomes a mentor to other veterans, those who arrive with the same vacant look he had when Jimmy found him. One day, sitting in the cafeteria, he hears someone calling out to him. It's Jimmy. The same smile as always, but now there's a different spark in his eyes. He pulls up a chair and sits beside John, observing the room filled with people restarting their lives. You know, John, when I met you, I saw someone the world had given up on. But I also saw something more. I saw someone who just needed a chance to remember who he really was. John lowers his gaze for a moment. He still remembers the feeling of being invisible, the pain of thinking he would never have a place in the world again. But now, around him, there are voices, laughter, stories being shared. He is part of something larger. You didn't just change your life, John, Jimmy continues. You are changing the lives of many others. John smiles, and this time, there's no shadow of doubt in his eyes. He stands up, walks down the hallway, and spots a young veteran sitting alone, holding a crumpled sign. The same type of sign that John carried months ago. He approaches, sits beside the young man, and with a friendly and sincere tone asks the same question that changed everything for him. Hey, how are you doing, my friend? How many people like John are out there? How many incredible stories are being forgotten because no one takes the time to ask, hey, how are you? Sometimes all someone needs isn't money, isn't fleeting charity, but rather an opportunity, a real chance to start over. John was a hero on the battlefield, but no one taught him how to fight against loneliness, abandonment, and hopelessness when he returned home. And how many other heroes are out there, invisible, just waiting for someone to recognize their worth? Jimmy could have simply given money and walked away, but he did something much greater. He gave John a purpose, and that changed everything. This story teaches us that small gestures can transform lives. A simple act of kindness can be the first step toward a fresh start. The question is, what if it were you? What if someone close to you only needed a word, a support, a second chance? Would you have the courage to lend a hand? If this story touched your heart, leave your comment down below. I want to know. What would you do if you had the chance to change someone's life? Let's talk. Your opinion matters greatly, and of course, if you enjoy stories like this, emotional and full of purpose, subscribe to the channel right now. Here, every story has the power to transform.